Let's talk about the next war that Israel will need to fight. But let me start by saying that there has been a sickening rise in anti-Semitism among those who call themselves Christian. And I use a lowercase c when I refer to these false brethren. I have little hope that I can turn these minions of Satan from their evil path. Salvation and repentance are the work of God. And although I will do my best to serve God in that work, I'm more interested in keeping my brothers and sisters from being tainted by this satanic hatred of the Jews. If you are caught by this hatred, you will suffer. If you are convinced of the need to oppose Israel, you will suffer. If you are turned away from supporting God's work in the land of Israel, you will suffer. So think about what I say about Israel as my attempt to help you avoid the traps of Satan that he has laid in your path. God is at work among the Jewish people and with the Jewish people. He is at work in the land of Israel, turning the Jewish people from their idols and towards the true God of Abraham. And I was in Israel for 15 years and saw all of that with my own eyes. When I say the true God of Abraham, I'm talking about Jesus Christ, guys. I'm not talking about some separate Messiah. We're talking Israelis becoming Christians. And my goal is that you would be greatly blessed. But you cannot be blessed if you oppose God. Psalm 122:6 says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee." May you prosper, and may you understand how important the land of Israel is in these last days. Now let's talk about that next awful war that is coming. It's an article from The Hill, and it's titled, "Hezbollah's Tunnels Offer Sneak Peek at Looming Major Conflict with Israel." I was surprised by how intelligent this article was until I looked at who was writing it. 3 retired military officers, 2 lieutenant generals and a lieutenant colonel. And because they are ex-military, they get it. And it is depressing to see how few really do. And these guys have done so well in their analysis that I'm going to shamelessly steal from their excellent article. Quote, "The tunnels are integral to this new threat. Built in violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 prohibiting Hezbollah's rearmament in this area, they are reportedly wide enough to move heavy military equipment and large troop units. Yet even in the unlikely event Israel locates every tunnel, 5 have been uncovered so far, Hezbollah will still use the terrain and towns of southern Lebanon to complicate Israeli counterattacks and maximize civilian casualties. Hezbollah is under no illusion such tactics will produce anything close to decisive military victory. Instead, these raids will target Israeli civilian communities where Hezbollah will seek to inflict as many casualties, take as many hostages, and cause as much destruction as possible before ultimately being annihilated or withdrawing. By inflicting significant casualties and planting its flag on Israeli territory, even briefly, Hezbollah will burnish its credentials as the only force capable of standing up to Israel. This also will compel Israeli leadership to respond forcefully in self-defense. When Israel responds, Hezbollah will exploit Lebanese civilian suffering, brought about primarily by its own illicit tactics of using these civilians to shield military assets to delegitimize Israel's self-defense. Close quote. Sounds like Hamas, guys. Right? This is how the Arabs have been fighting Israel ever since 1973. They realized that they couldn't win on the battlefield, so they decided to create situations where they could be attacked, meaning Israel could be attacked in the court of public opinion. The mainstream media decided to comply and to help this effort with foul and evil enthusiasm. Dirtbags, every one of them. And I know some of these people. But there's more. Quote, "Exercising its core tactic, Hezbollah uses civilian buildings as entry points for these tunnels. Far more pervasively, it emplaces military assets in civilian buildings and densely populated villages, knowing full well the IDF will be compelled to eliminate these capabilities, most notably firing positions, missile and rocket stockpiles, and infiltration routes. And the IDF will have to do so rapidly. Preventing Hezbollah from devastating Israel's military bases, critical infrastructure, and cities. Hezbollah is banking on predictable condemnation falling on Israel for the inevitable collateral damage and civilian suffering resulting from such military action. But the true irony is that the IDF will make all possible efforts to mitigate risks to the same Lebanese civilians being exploited by Hezbollah. Its operations will be guided by international law, even as Hezbollah deliberately violates those same obligations." Close quote. You didn't need to be ex-military to figure this out, but I guess that if you are an American and have never lived in Israel, you probably need to be. I just do not understand the inability that we all have to see the truth of something like this. Yes, part of the problem is due to the fact that newspapers and television shows have been lying to us. But still, you would think that people could see through the lies. These military guys then say this, quote, "Hezbollah's strategy relies on exploiting widespread misunderstanding of the law of armed conflict, chiefly the prevalent but erroneous assumption that the army blowing something up must bear all responsibility for the ensuing suffering. In reality, as will most certainly be the case with Hezbollah, those who expose civilians to mortal risk by attempting to shield behind them are truly responsible for the consequences." Exploiting this misunderstanding worked for Hezbollah in 2006, just as Hamas, ISIS, and others regularly find success with such approaches against armed forces that try often in vain to avoid civilian casualties. Close quote. Did you know that the Israeli military employs a massive group of Arabic speakers that they use to call civilian targets that they need to destroy? That's right. When Hezbollah or Hamas put ammunition stockpiles underneath a hospital or apartment building, those stockpiles must be destroyed, because every one of those bullets and bombs means an Israeli killed. Yet Israel does its best to keep from killing civilians, so they call up the targets and tell them to evacuate. What other country in the world does that? No one, except Israel. It is sickening to see how unwilling the world is to see the truth. Now, let's take this analysis one step further by telling you that the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, knows what these ex-military people are saying. They get it, and they got it a long time ago, so you can bet that they have a strategy to deal with it. What do you think that strategy is? Well, they haven't told us, and they aren't going to, but if Hezbollah makes it too hard to attack their military infrastructure, Israel will need to look for easier targets. In fact, Israel will need to target those who are supporting Hezbollah and giving them their orders. Who gives Hezbollah their orders? Iran. But Iran is far away. So how are they going to hit Iran? Well, Iran is scattered throughout Syria, so targeting Iranian targets in Syria is an option. But that's a very limited option. My suspicion, and it's a biased suspicion, is that they will do a decapitation strike on Damascus to throw Syria into chaos and limit Hezbollah's ability to be resupplied with military equipment. Why do I call my suspicion biased? Well, Isaiah 17 speaks of Damascus being destroyed so completely that it is unable to be rebuilt as a city. This has never happened, and the recent civil war in Syria seemed to be creating the conditions of the fulfillment of Isaiah 17 until the situation reversed. However, Israel will have noticed that Hezbollah activity against Israel was dramatically reduced while Syria was in chaos. This means that Israel may be required to throw Syria into chaos again to neutralize Hezbollah and Iran. And a decapitation strike might work. What is a decapitation strike? Well, decapitation means to unhead someone or take off their head. And if you ever spent any time looking at the layout of Damascus, you'll see that the central authority of Syria is located in just one place. If Israel could eliminate the Alawite leadership of Syria, the civil war would restart and Hezbollah supply lines would be, or at least could be, cut. I know that this would be a rather brutal strategy, but Israel doesn't have very many options. She has too few friends and too many enemies. The fact that the Arabs are softening their stance against Israel is nice, but insufficient. When your back is against the wall, or in this case against the sea, you have no other choice. And well, you take the only choice that is left to you. Please understand that we allowed this situation to develop. We gave aid and comfort to the foul fiends from hell that are trying to destroy Israel. So we only have ourselves to blame. when Israel does the only thing that she can do to defeat her enemies. The fact that it would fulfill the prophecy written in Isaiah 17 would just be incidental. By the way, the authors of this article deserve specific mention. They are Lieutenant General Kenneth Gluck, I assume that G-L-U-E-C-K, or Gluck. He's Commander, U.S. Marine Corps Combat Development Command, retired. Lieutenant General Michael Tucker, retired, is a former commander, 1st United States Army. Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Korn is professor of law at South Texas College of Law, Houston. Well done, guys. And yes, I know that it was obvious, but so few are saying the obvious that you get credit for writing what you wrote. It needed to be written. And my hope is that people share this. And then to emphasize the point further, Reuters has an article and a photo. It's titled, Assad Meets Khamenei in First Iran Visit Since Syrian War Began. If you want to see the Syria-Iran-Hezbollah connection, this illustrates it all too well. Remember that Iraq acted as a block to this connection. While Saddam Hussein was in power, Iran was unable to transport military supplies over land. And Israel was able to stop Iranian ships that were bound for Lebanon. But when the U.S. took down Saddam, Iran had a new route to their Hezbollah, their agents in Lebanon. Did the U.S. ever stop to think about what it was doing when it took down Saddam? I doubt it. There isn't a lot of thinking that goes on in Washington. Saddam was a bad guy. There can be no doubt about it. He deserved to be taken down. But what we now have is 10 times worse.